Many count Christopher Nolan's 2006 thriller The Prestige as one of his finest films, and nothing gets fans going like a sequel. So why have we never seen The Prestige 2? Let's start with the most obvious reason why The Prestige 2 hasn't happened yet. Christopher Nolan simply hasn't expressed any intention to make a sequel. Even if he wanted to, it doesn't seem like Nolan has the time. He couldn't release any kind of sequel right after the release of the original because he had his hands full with his Dark Knight trilogy. Even after he finished up in Gotham, Nolan found plenty of other projects that he presumably found more interesting. Nolan has also expressed interest in doing a James Bond film, so he might prioritize that over a sequel to The Prestige. Meanwhile, some fans speculate that after Oppenheimer, Nolan could attempt to return to a previously unfinished project, a remake of the 1967 show The Prisoner, which Nolan was briefly attached to direct in 2009. Others predict he might continue his trend of historical films such as Dunkirk and Oppenheimer. However, a sequel to The Prestige is at least a remote possibility. That said, there's still a chance that Nolan could return to the world of The Prestige, even after spending more than 15 years working on other films. Nolan seems to prefer taking a break to work on something else before returning to direct a sequel. That's what happened with his Dark Knight trilogy. After moving away from Batman to direct Inception, Nolan came back for The Dark Knight Rises, later admitting to Entertainment Weekly that the break left him invigorated and excited to return to Gotham City.
Speak of the devil, and he shall appear.
It's worth noting that The Prestige actually originated as a small-scale project that Nolan wanted to film in between Batman movies. After releasing Batman Begins, Nolan shared that he was open to doing a sequel, but added that it wasn't his highest priority. In 2005, he told Black Film, "Well, I definitely intend to do something else first. I want to do something smaller after having done such a big film." Now that Nolan has spent over 10 years creating epic standalone films, he might be more willing to come back to The Prestige. Of course, Nolan's sentiments might also have changed since then. In a later interview with Hitflix, he said, "I tend to think that if you have the chance to do a big film, you should do it while you can. I'm always worried maybe I won't be able to do a big film again." While there's still some hope that The Prestige 2 might one day come about, you probably shouldn't hold your breath. Judging by how the first movie ended, producing a sequel would come with some inherent challenges, especially if it were to live up to the original. For one, the absence of Hugh Jackman's Angier would make filming a sequel quite difficult. The rivalry between Borden and Angier sits at the heart of The Prestige. Yet with Angier presumed dead, any sequel would be missing that key element. And while the existence of all those clones could give Nolan a good excuse to bring him back, it wouldn't be easy to do this without seeming contrived. Nolan could also create a new character to face off against Borden. But Hugh Jackman left some pretty big shoes to fill in that regard. Here's another problem. We already know exactly how Angier and Borden perform their magic tricks. The ending of The Prestige already revealed these magicians' deepest secrets, which doesn't leave much to explore in the sequel. While it's possible that The Prestige 2 could unearth more of Borden's secrets or introduce a new character with their own, it would be difficult to top the reveal at the end of The Prestige. Like any good magic trick, a story is less interesting to watch when you already know how it's all pulled off. Since nobody has announced a sequel to The Prestige, there's been no news from Christian Bale on whether or not he would return as Borden. We do, however, know how Bale feels about returning as Batman, which suggests how he might respond to a potential Prestige 2. When asked by comicbook.com if he would be willing to star in a fourth Batman movie, Bale said, "If Christopher Nolan ever decided to do it again, and if he chose to come my way again, then yeah, I would consider it." So it tracks that he would most likely be interested in playing Borden again, so long as Nolan is directing. Since Michael Caine is another frequent Nolan collaborator, it's likely that he would be game to reprise his role as Cutter. Scarlett Johansson probably wouldn't need much convincing to return either. She once described The Prestige as one of the most beautiful scripts she has ever read.
Absolutely perfect, and I thought I have to do this project. I wanted to do it so badly.
Likewise, Hugh Jackman loved The Prestige so much that he urged his own production company to study Nolan's crew as a model. No doubt he'd be thrilled to return as Robert Angier if he were needed. When developing The Prestige, Nolan begged David Bowie to accept the part of Nikola Tesla. He later told Entertainment Weekly, "I told him if he didn't agree to do the part, I had no idea where I would go from there." Now it's impossible to imagine the film without Bowie, and a sequel arguably wouldn't feel complete without Tesla either. Alas, we will not get to see him portray Tesla again, since Bowie died in 2016. Still, Nolan might figure out a way to create a sequel even without Bowie's presence. After all, Nolan managed to write a fitting conclusion to Batman's story without the Joker, and without making his absence obvious. Speaking about the fact that the Joker is barely mentioned in The Dark Knight Rises, Nolan told Empire, "That is something I felt very strongly about in terms of my relationship with Heath and the experience I went through with him on The Dark Knight. I didn't want to do in any way try and account for a real-life tragedy. That seemed inappropriate to me." So if Nolan does ever decide to make The Prestige 2, it seems unlikely that Tesla will have any part to play even off-screen. If The Prestige 2 ever comes to fruition, there are countless possible storylines it could explore. At the end of The Prestige, we saw Alfred Borden reuniting with his daughter and presumably retiring from the stage. But the sequel could well follow Borden as he returns to the magician's lifestyle once more. If Angia isn't coming back at all, another character from the first movie could easily step up to play an antagonistic role. Who better to cross swords with Borden than his former assistant Olivia? She knows most of his tricks after all. Meanwhile, Borden's obsession might lead him to all but abandon his daughter Jess, who would now be a teenager. Or maybe the hopes to train her as his assistant and eventual successor. There are so many paths a Prestige sequel could tread. Basically, anything could happen.